every From Software Soulsborne game ranked by Billy Givens of Digital Trends. We gotta talk about this list, okay? He starts off by saying, it could be said that From Software's ever-expanding collection of punishing but rewarding role-playing games, lovingly referred to as the Soulsborne series. I like this writing already. Very, very good. Has been among the most influential of all time. They also say the Souls-likes, that's what they're referred to as a subgenre. But many studios have tried to mimic the famed Japanese developer's game design philosophy to varying results. Few have come close to offering the same breathtaking experiences. You're writing poetry right now, Billy. Poetry. However, your ranking is kind of crazy. So let's get into it. He does rank all the Souls games from Software. This does not include, Armored Core or anything like that. Soulsborne games only. So yeah, we're gonna start with number 7 here, which I actually do agree with, and that is Demon Souls. I feel like, yeah, I did only play the remake from Bluepoint, not the OG, but I would rank Demon Souls here at number 7. I believe this writer also just is going based off the remake. For the most part, he says here, Bluepoint's 2020 1-to-1 remake of the game has vastly improved upon some of its roughest spots, but even then, Demon Souls remains a fun but flawed experience. So yeah, I could agree with this a lot. This would probably be the bottom of my ranking as well. Beautiful game, of course, beautiful graphics. I love the game. It's just kind of one of those worst of the best, right? Whenever we talk about Soulsborne and we appreciate all of them, there's got to be a worst one still. And yes, this is kind of the worst of the best that we love so dearly. But yeah, it would be at the bottom for me as well. So far so good, Billy. So far so good, all right? You haven't said nothing crazy yet. However, we get to number 6 and you got Bloodborne at number 6. Hold up. Wait a minute. I gotta check something. This man has Bloodborne at number 6. I don't even know what to say. I feel speechless. Bloodborne at number 6 is definitely wild to me. He goes on to say in the article, one could argue that it offered a little less in the way of weapons and armor, which is true, than folks were used to from the Dark Souls games, but the release of Bloodborne nevertheless proved From Software had what it took to step outside of the shadow of the proper Souls franchise without sacrificing the most impactful parts of its DNA. This sounds, yes, Kaden, this sounds like praise right here from you, Billy. This sounds like really good things to say about Bloodborne, despite kind of taking a step away from Dark Souls, but at the same time not sacrificing what's so impactful from the DNA of Soulsborne. It's crazy to say all that, but then have Bloodborne so low on the list. I could never. Bloodborne would absolutely be higher on my list, okay? And if you're thinking this list is kind of different and something you haven't really seen before, just as we're barely getting going with it, take a look at this next one. Number 5. Dark Souls, the original Dark Souls at number 5, which to me is crazy to see because typically when I see a list like this, Dark Souls is usually higher up. It's never really this low, especially before a couple other choices that we're gonna get to. I'm sure you're thinking in your mind already, we still know what's going to be on this list. Those are going to be higher? What is going on? There is one game specifically rearing its ugly head, so to speak, right now. You know what I'm talking about. So here we are with Dark Souls 1 at number 5. Something I'm definitely not used to seeing. So let me scroll through this paragraph. He says here, though it hasn't aged as well as some of From Software's offerings, it remains one of the most important games in the history of the medium. The history! But it's at number 5. That is interesting as heck, I gotta tell you. That is interesting. Next, we have Dark Souls 3 at number 4. Oh, the pain in my chest. The pain in my heart. Dark Souls 3 at number 4. To me, this is my favorite. My absolute favorite. And he has it at number 4. Oh, that's wild. I don't even know what to say. It says here, for those who felt Dark Souls 2 was too much of a departure from the first game, Dark Souls 3 was intended to rectify that by returning to many of the core design pillars of which the original game was built. Despite this return to form, the final game in the trilogy was anything but a step backward and came packing plenty of color. So I'm expecting like a criticism to follow up, like a but... However, you know, I'm expecting that, but it's still praising the game. It's kind of wild. I don't know. I'm not really finding a reason why this is worse than Dark Souls 2. Interesting. And speaking of, here is that game that is rearing its ugly head. I like how they put the Metacritic scores on here just to kind of show, okay, what was the reception. Dark Souls 2 with a 79. And it says in the paragraph here, arguably From Software's most polarizing game. Oh, it definitely is. Definitely. Dark Souls 2 managed to stick to much of the original game's formula while still shocking many players with some unexpected mechanics and design choices. I actually like Dark Souls 2. If you guys don't know, I started on Dark Souls 2 when it comes to the Dark Souls series. I played it after Bloodborne. I know. You're probably not surprised why I had that reaction earlier about Bloodborne, because yes, I started with that and then I went to Dark Souls 2. Crazy kind of lineup, but that's what I did. And I actually liked it. I mean, it started my love for the Dark Souls series, so of course I'm gonna be a little bit biased, but to have it this high on the list, and especially above Dark Souls 3, I'm like, no. Absolutely not. But that's just me. Of course, this is their list. It's just kind of wild. Due to some clever, difficult managing mechanics and more frequent bonfires, it was also slightly more accessible than Dark Souls. Yeah, I remember that. I guess maybe quality of life changes here. They appreciated, you know, even though it was different in many ways, it did stick to the Dark Souls formula and all of that. I mean, we know that. But this is probably the most surprising ranking in the whole list, because typically 9 out of 10 times whenever I see someone's list, Dark Souls 2 is not this high. So I give them credit and kudos for being different, and if this is how they really feel, man, that's interesting. This is definitely a different list than what I'm used to seeing, you know. Then let's go on to the final two here. At number 2, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. So we know what's number 1 at this point. Elden Ring, number 1. So this whole list has me thinking, okay, I'm thinking this writer and whoever agrees with it, they really love Elden Ring, obviously. They love it. They love how accessible it is, the changes and quality of life changes, stuff like that, the open world. And when I look back at the rest of the list, like Sekiro, for example, Dark Souls 2, they talked about the changes and being more accessible. Right here, boom, more accessible than Dark Souls 1. I'm thinking they favor maybe this newer style of different accessibility, different combat. Sekiro, of course, has very different combat. It's very much more of an action game, not really a Soulsborne all the way. It's got some, you know, kind of rhythm to it. You gotta play it like that with rhythm instead of the typical, you know, blocking and dodging and that's it. Sekiro is very different. So I'm just kind of thinking that's where they're coming from. They have Dark Souls 1 low on the list, Bloodborne low. Remember, there's not a lot of weapons as much as they're used to. I think they just really appreciate an abundance of weapons, accessibility options, better fast travel, better quicker ways to the bosses, you know, maybe things like that is more important to them, and they felt, you know, Dark Souls 2 kind of strayed away from it being a little bit more difficult, and then they probably thought Sekiro brought in all this crazy combat, which is new and fresh, and then Elden Ring with the accessibility options even going further. I could see that kind of making sense, but I'm kind of reaching right now. I'm kind of reaching to understand their brain when it comes to this list, but everybody's got their reasons. of course, and if this is a genuine list, it's surprising in a lot of ways, and it's very different than what I'm used to seeing, like I said. So I wanted to talk about this list. Definitely not what I would have. I might do a video of my list soon, but I definitely would have Dark Souls 3 much higher. Just spoiler alert on that. I would have it way higher. Same thing with Bloodborne. I would probably at this point have it Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, and then probably Sekiro, number 3. Probably. That would probably be my top 3, and then Elden Ring, number 4. Something like that. And then we would go from there. But yeah, I just definitely wanted to talk about this list. Let me know what you think about this list. Is it wild to you? Do you agree with it? Do you agree with most of it? I would be very curious to see your guys' responses to this. Let me know in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.